Thank you very much. I will be very brief, I hope. I'm in the embarrassing situation of having to completely endorse this report. I found myself, when I was reading it, nodding furiously and scrabbling in the margins. Yes, yes, very often. So congratulations to the Sahel Working Group and indeed to Peter for an excellent piece of work. Just to pull out some things that we particularly agree with, we agree the centrality of food responses in the Sahel is wrong. We agree that the conceptual framework, the linear relief development approach and way of thinking about it is wrong. The continuum is dead in the Sahel, and we need a new way of packaging our way of responding to these chronic vulnerabilities in the Sahel. We agree, and this is a matter close to our Secretary of State's heart, we agree with the cost argument. We understand that it is much, much more better value for money to put money in before the crisis than after the crisis, and your figures I underline that very well, Peter. We agree that an integrated approach is necessary. So, what can I add to this conversation? We agree with everything. Well, I think really what I wanted to say is just a little bit of a DFID perspective from what's going on inside Palace Street at the moment to tell you where our thinking has got to, and I'll attempt to be very brief. These messages, a lot of these messages are not new. That's not to take away from the excellent work that's been done here, which brings it together in a very compelling manner. So why are we still here? Why are we still having this conversation? Well, I'd like to throw up for you what I consider to be 4 institutional challenges that I see from within DFID. I was warned earlier on by Camilla that I ought not to be so frank in discussing what's going on inside DFID, but I'll attempt to give you a flavour of what I see as the main constraints that we've got. First of all, there is the issue of structure. Simon Levin, ODI's very own Simon Levin, pointed out to us in a conference in Nairobi just the other day that DFID needed to be congratulated on putting resilience at the heart of its new humanitarian framework. And just as we were sitting there feeling very smug about this, he then pointed out in front of a packed auditorium that it was a shame that the development actors inside DFID didn't also have resilience at the heart of their work. And that was a really painful point because it was absolutely spot on. It tends to be the humanitarians still in the blue corner and the development actors in the red corner. And there is increasingly constructive engagement, but we need to go a lot further. This reflects the old paradigms, the old way of working, where you flicked a switch when GAM rates got above 15%, and you scrambled operations team from DFID in their black leotards who came in and did a standard approach for therapeutic feeding, and then everybody goes back to sleep again. We can't do that in the Sahel, and we need to get better with inside DFID at doing that. The second challenge, which we're grappling with inside DFID, is our own funding mechanisms. You're either humanitarian response or you're development. And our constraint inside DFID reflects the one that has been very eloquently underlined by Peter in the international system. We need to get to a stage where when FAO comes to us and say, we want to do a restocking program in the Sahel, it'll take 2.5 years, that there is some pot of money that they can tap into. Because at the moment, the humanitarians shrug their shoulders and say, well, sorry, that's too long for us. And the development actors say, that sounds a bit like a crisis response, we're not interested. The third area that I wanted to touch on is the coordination architecture. Sorry, this is looking outside DFID here, maybe I'm cheating a bit. We have spent in DFID an awful lot of time working on reform of the humanitarian system. Opinions are divided about whether that has been successful, but I believe it has gone some way to making us more effective at humanitarian response. However, if you take resilience and apply it to the humanitarian international coordination architecture, it doesn't work. Which sector deals with resilience? The most obvious example of this is with cash, which I see as probably the best exemplar of where humanitarian and development work can talk to each other with a common resilience framework. If you try talking about cash in the framework of humanitarian architecture, the existing architecture, you get every single cluster around the table. You get 300 people in the same room because everybody has an interest. We need to reform the humanitarian architecture to be able to handle the humanitarian end of the resilience discussion. The final area I want to talk about is the issue of money. I was interested to see your figures, Peter. 1% spent on DRR in 2005, 4% on DRR in 2009, and we deserve a pat on the back. But come on, guys, 4%. Why isn't it 40%? That's where we need to be to get this really to stick. Now, this is where we have to be very pragmatic. The occurrence of the discussion about resilience, and I believe it's got an awful lot more international currency than it has had for, well, the last decade as far as I can remember, and the coincidence of the international global financial crisis is not good. Why? Because what we are explicitly asking the international system to do is to put money in fragile, conflict-affected, humanitarian basket case environments, not even when there's a crisis. And believe me, I've been working on the Horn crisis for the last 4 or 5 months, and I can tell you that getting the international system to respond when there is a crisis and squeezing money out for the Horn response across the international system has been like getting blood out of the proverbial stone. And the ask we're now making is to say, okay, guys, there isn't a crisis. This is just a very non-resilient environment. We need big investment now. This is a really big ask, okay? Just highlighting some of the problems. I believe in everything that you're saying, Peter, but there are some big challenges here. Just to let you know that DFID has it covered, all right? Because all of these areas are things that we are actively working on. I think that the Humanitarian Emergency Response Review and the humanitarian policy that has spun out of that is the best opportunity that we have got in the last decade to really change the way the UK and international humanitarian aid system works. And I use the word aid system not just to mean humanitarian relief, but the whole collective. So there's a lot to be hopeful about. And I was also delighted to see that rather than giving us a thorough thrashing, which this report well could, about what we've done badly, it also did highlight, the greening of bits of Niger. We're making progress in places. So, courage. And thank you very much, Peter, for an excellent report and presentation.